Friends, as you are aware that our webinar series began in 2020 during the COVID pandemic and driven by the enthusiastic support and participation of the attendees and generous knowledge sharing by our experts. This journey is continuing, and today we have reached to 199 webinar. I thank all of you, uh, those who have joined this webinar and the past webinar, and we will look forward for an engaging and insightful session today. Friends, we just want to announce very important announcement that our journey of knowledge sharing is going on, and this is 199th webinar. So on 20th December, we will have our 200th webinar, and most prominent speaker will be there to speak on catalysts for corporate growth, unveiling the next wave of regulatory reforms. You can understand in the 4 years, 4.5 years, we have done this journey of 200 webinars. So your participation is required to encourage all of us so we can take part and do something great for this. Friends, coming to the today's topic, materiality study or materiality assessment is crucial for companies to identify prioritize the most relevant risks and opportunities that can impact business operation and stakeholder relation. This webinar will provide you valuable insight into the process of determining vital instances in the form of materiality assessment and its significance in ESG framework implementation. When the issue of this topic has come, so some of the delegate has asked, because this is a new topic, ESG is a new topic, and in the ESG, when we are talking concept of materiality in ESG analysis, that is also new. So issue was that what is materiality in ESG? So for the corporate world, you must be aware that whenever we are talking about SEBI law or SEBI disclosure or RPT disclosure, then we are talking about one word, that all disclosure are not required. We should give the material disclosure. So material disclosure means something which is bigger, not the small thing. So there is a one particular aspects of that you have to give all violations. So the violation of 100 rupees or violation of 10,000 or 10 crore or 100 crore, all are equal, or we have to see the materiality. You do the related party transaction, and in that transaction, are you reporting everything, or you have to report material transaction? So the materiality concept is taking a shape, and this is also coming everywhere. What is happening today? There is a regime of disclosure. So people, they bombard disclosure. So they think they don't want to take any risk. They want to disclose as much as possible. And that is also happening with the new concept of ESG, because the concept is new, the environmental, social, and governance. So earlier we were talking about the governance, that is also not fulfilled. Now the environmental and social issue has come, and social has no barrier. It can reach to anywhere. Environmental is also another issue. So there is no boundaries of anything. So people sometimes confuse, and without realizing this, they bombard the disclosure. Under this process, what is happening? The genuine disclosure, they lost its relevance, and that's why the materiality concept is there. So materiality in ESG context refer to identify, prioritizing, and addressing the most significant risk, opportunity, and issues that can impact a company's performance, value, and relationship with stakeholder. It acts as a guiding principle for strategic decision making and reporting. So friends, this is the basic concept which is very important. And now materiality assessment is taking place, because that is help organization to avoid overloading the report, because you should not give each and everything which is relevant, and you should ensure the compliance with a regulatory framework, and meeting investor demand and meaningful ESG information, which can give some relevant thing. Now, the question is why this materiality is essential. One is strategic focus should be there if you are giving the material thing. Shareholders or stakeholders trust also develop, because if you bombard information which is not connected, then people lose interest. Then risk management, and you can focus more on those risks which are more material and where the penalty and the risk and the business risk is also there. And the regulatory compliances, where the regulator is asking certain things that is required. Then competitive advantage. Sometimes what is happening, if you are giving a correct information, a relevant information, then you are far ahead than others. Now, some word will come when the discussion will take place, that is very popular nowadays. People are talking the single materiality, double materiality, sector specific materiality. That is also new things are coming. So the single materiality is normal, focus on how environment and social factor affect the company's financial performance. But double materiality is also now the new concept, and this consideration not only impact the ESG on the company, but also the company's impact on society. So it is not that what ESG is impacting company, but what company is impacting, or their principles are impacting society and environment. That is also becoming very popular nowadays. Now, another thing is when the word started ESG, that is everybody was following, but now the demand of sector specific materiality is also becoming very popular, like carbon emission in manufacturing versus data privacy in the service sector. Or somebody is saying that those companies which are uh, giving service, they are producing more carbon than the manufacturing company. This discussion is going on. So sector specific materiality can solve this. Now, the point is these things will uh, definitely will shape double materiality and sector specific. And as I told you, these all things impact business, stakeholders, environmental and social impact, and so many things are there. But the question is, what we are talking about, what is the status of international scenario? So global standard alignment we have to do, because now universally guideline of a standardization of materiality assessment across border is taking place. So you have to follow. Then you have to or understand the universal guideline for standardization. The organization like ISSB, International Sustainable Standard Board, and GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, are working on harmonizing these things across the country. Sector specific framework that is also working out, and various sector like technology, manufacturing, and financial services, they are giving different type of thing. Then technological integration is taking place, leveraging of AI, data analytical, so that conduct more precise and dynamic materiality assessment is taking place, so it can give a proactive things for material things. Then regulatory evaluation is also a question. Stakeholder involvement is there, and how the investors are doing, taking action in other part of the world will impact the other country also. So you have to create a mechanism. Capacity building, that is also important, because there's a new subject, new thing, and everything is confusing, or it take time. So that's why that is capacity building is very, very essential. Now, some of the developments which are taking place nationally or globally, that is European Union is doing corporate sustainability reporting directive. They mandate companies to adopt double materiality in their discussion or disclosure. United States SEC proposed climate disclosure rules, including materiality and criteria for reporting environmental risk. Asia specific, Japan specifically is talking about the corporate governance code, emphasizing on material ESG factor in decision making. India, BRSR focus on materiality, ESG disclosure on for listed companies. Global reporting standard, that ISSB and GRI are covering their framework to create a cohesive global standard for materiality assessment. And these things are changing the entire things. Now, for all organizations, those who are following this, they must shift from single to double materiality, invest in technology and tool for real-time ESG data tracking, train teams to adopt sector-specific approach to materiality, strengthening stakeholders' engagement, process of capacity enhancement, and transition of integrated reporting where ESG materiality is part of the annual financial disclosure. Now, these are the things which uh, is changing, and today we will discuss all these points by our learned speakers. So, and we will discuss this also, that how the materiality element for the service sector, manufacturing sector, and how the case use cases and benefit, how those who have followed this, how they have taken advantage. All these points will be there in our discussion, and I extend a very warm welcome to Ankit Singhi, who is Head Corporate Affairs and Compliance Reporting Corporate Professional. He heads this ESG services. Then Sukriti Kashyap, Senior Associate, ESG Reporting and Sustainability Solution, Corporate Professional. She is an environmental advocate and practice in ESG. Her knowledge on the ESG and Indian ethos is superb, which you will see in today's presentation also. And the program structure will be like this. First, Ankit will give an overview. Then Sukriti will discuss this concept and talk about the entire issue and how it is taking place. So before giving to Ankit, I just want to inform again to all our panelists or all our speakers that our 200th webinar, Catalyst for Corporate Growth, unveiling the next wave of corporate regulatory reforms. We have invited visionaries in corporate and thought leader inspiring new direction, legislature and policy maker, judiciary, regulator, civil servant, corporate leader, corporate governance expert, advocate and law firm professionals, all will join us on 20th. And the program will start from 3 o'clock because we have to showcase so many things in place of 4 to 6. It is this program on a signature program, we always have 1 hour ahead. So 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. I request all the delegates, register yourself and tell other friends. With this, I request Ankit to give overview on this concept of this materiality.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. I think since you mentioned about the 200th program, I believe we all are very excited about it. And I can see how much effort you are putting it to make it a great success. And the kind of speakers we are inviting, the subject matter, I think everybody participating will definitely tend to gain out of it. So we look forward for the webinar on next Friday. It would be also a celebration time at corporate professionals. So talking about on the today's topic on the cracking the materiality code for ESG analysis. Sukriti, I think you can put it on slideshow. And when I ask you, then only you change the slides. Can you put this on slideshow?
I'm putting it on slideshow, just a second.
So regarding the materiality code for ESG, sir, we have discussed in our previous webinars also, everybody is today talking about ESG. But all mostly in India, people are mostly concerned in terms of more on reporting on ESG rather than per se ESG. And that reporting is also mainly on account of the reason of BRSR being there in the say BRODR regulations. While BRR was always there, BRSR it's a very extended version of BRR with a lot of quantitative data. And once people started giving all those data, Sukriti, first slide only. When people started giving all those data, then there was also a lot of discussion going on around the world on climate change, and all COPs been happening every year. Investors also showing a lot of initiatives or understanding towards companies' efforts towards ESG. Everybody then started talking about ESG and how it is important. And what is fundamentally challenging with ESG is that this is not a codified term in anywhere. One cannot get a book and see that this is all ESG. Like we talk about even LODR regulations, any law, it's a codified law. And you can read from starting to beginning all the sections and can get to know what the law is all about. But since in ESG there is no codified law, it's a sum of various parts. There is a lot of things that we need to understand in order to understand ESG and then also to implement or preach ESG. And therefore, in that context, it is very important for to understand that what actually forms part of ESG and how what needs to be done under ESG. There, the role of a materiality assessment comes into picture. Because unless and until, because as I mentioned, it's not a codified law, there are hundreds of topics or 200s of topics that can be covered in any ESG implementation process. It's important for companies to actually find out how to begin. And ESG is not just about reporting. You cannot report something unless and until you have prepared for you have prepared towards it, implemented in, and then you are able to when you're in a position to showcase that in form of a reporting. Reporting is actually is just an output of what you're doing. It's just you're outlining to the world, to your investors, stakeholders, that these are the things I am doing, which are in which have an impact on climate, sustainability, and a lot of related issues. It affects various stakeholders. So therefore, it's very important for organizations to understand that in what areas we need to prepare ourselves, understand those things, then create a roadmap, create a framework as to what needs to be done, and then started implementing so that you are in a position to implement and then report something good, that some tangible and some tangible benefits are also there. Intangible benefits will always be there. So in that sense, it is very important for us to understand the importance of materiality assessment, because it's just one of the key part of the entire process of any ESG journey for a company, in order to understand what are the key areas, topics, things which creates impacts for any organization, where you need to develop a materiality assessment, where you need to create a framework. That framework should delve into all those things over a period of 1 year, 2 year, whatever your timelines, in order to achieve the milestones that you have set yourself in your ESG journey. So therefore, in that sense, we thought that in this webinar we can discuss about, because it's also the materiality assessment. It's also not a very codified process. It will depend from differ from company to company. And we need to understand, we need to look into various things to understand how the materiality assessment program needs to be designed and then implemented to achieve the outcome that we are intending to get out of it. So to begin with, I think it's important, since it's about materiality code, the first and important topic is any materiality assessment is to understand the materiality elements, the key material elements. So next slide, Surya. Sukriti, next slide.
So there is some technical error. We are figuring it out. Just give me 1 second. Sorry for that. Next slide.
Ankit, you carry on. You just
Okay.
give some example of.
I have the slides. So by material elements, it means understanding the key elements that are necessary for a company, or which are part of the entire company's ecosystem, which have important impact on the ability of a company to create an impact in areas of ESG. Or also its ability to destroy its value, that it may create in ES or G. So these are the key elements which a company needs to consider. For example, if I am going for a financial services provider, for him, while net profit, quality of asset size is important. Similarly, for him, ethical practices, addressing customer grievances, compliance of regulatory provisions is also important. So therefore, all these things which are very important for an organization, an important role to play in assisting the company in achieving its goals under E, S, and G. These are all the key material elements that we need to understand and identify as part of the materiality assessment process. This is so if you see, if it is entity specific factors that hold relevance based on the nature or magnitude of their intensity, having potential to impact the entity's performance. So as I say, a good asset size, quality of asset size is as important to impact the performance of a company, so long as also to address the grievances of the customers, having a sound policy of following sound ethical practices of the manner in which you onboard your customers. Similarly, in the manner in which you treat your workforce who is working on those areas. All these things are important for us to understand that these forms key material elements for any organization, and all these things needs to be looked into when you are planning or working around any ESG plan. Next, materiality assessment. Next slide. So materiality assessment, as I mentioned, once we are able to identify materiality, key material elements, we need to undertake a process in where we identify all the key material topics, that these are the key areas which are material in terms of risk and opportunities for an organization, and the impact that these material elements will have in the journey of the organization on the company and on its various stakeholders. So it helps you in identifying both key elements which are internal and external to the organization, and which helps or impacts both the company and its various stakeholders. As I mentioned, net profit or good asset size, while it's as crucial for a company, but for consumers, offering them ethical practices, offering them the correct information of their product, addressing their grievance is also as important for any organization as a good net profit or a good asset size. So therefore, in while a materiality assessment and what an organization does, organization works across all these key parameters under E, S, and G, try to identify all those important parameters, try to understand the kind of importance that an organization attaches to them, and then the person doing the assessment also brings in some its own experience to understand to what extent these factors are important, and then try to prioritize them and also ascertain their impact. So while giving them priority, it not only considers their impact within the organization, their impact outside the organization, in a sense that which help them to prioritize them better. And once they are able to prioritize them better, then they are able to understand that these are the key topics in terms of their priority, according to which the ESG journey of a company should be designed. And all those areas under E, S, and G needs to be then considered by the implementer who intends to create a roadmap around all those points to achieve sustainability, to achieve the roadmaps that company intends to set, which they want to achieve at the end of the journey. Next, but core objectives, as I mentioned, you have to identify key risk and opportunities. You have to define your sustainability strategies, because once you are able to identify key material areas, you can define your strategies. Assess stakeholders, engagement, and impact. As I mentioned, we need to assess impact both in terms of internal impact on those factors and also external impact, how your stakeholders are viewing those key material things. Future increasing resilience and sustainability factors. So all those also helps in understanding. Once you are able to determine the importance of these factors, it also helps in company in creating sustainability factors around it. And then last, targets for improvement. Next, how materiality assessment is important for board, because for board it is important that board has to be aligned with the management in terms of how they want to achieve their ESG journey. So for conducting a materiality assessment also brings a lot of inputs for the board, like they be able to help, as I mentioned, identification of hidden risk and latent opportunities. Then they are able to, because of these all matrices that come out of the assessment process, board will be able to help, that will help board in setting up an ESG vision and mission. Because like an organization's vision and mission, company's ESG vision and mission is also important. Only all these ESG mission, vision and mission will guide the company as to how it intends to achieve the sustainability roadmap over the years. Then setting up of ESG roadmaps, once it sets up the vision and mission, then also ESG roadmaps. It brings a lot of external point of view, because mostly companies engage external experts to undertake these materiality assessment. So the assessor also, based off their experience out of these out of the learnings of from other assessments from other industries and their own inputs can bring a lot of values for the board in order to achieve or set up these vision, missions, and roadmap. And then all these things at the end will help companies in creating new innovations as to how they will be achieving these KPIs through these roadmap, what new things that need to bring in, what things that needs to be modified, what things that needs to be included for the first time. All these things needs to be considered when from point of view of materiality assessment. And therefore all these things bring a lot of value for the board, because it's the board who will first set the guidelines as to how the company will move, and these materiality assessment will bring those value additions for the board. Then why it is important, as I mentioned, all the key frameworks across the board, while BRSR is more of a reporting framework, SSB, IR, CDP, they all in some manner talks about the importance of materiality assessment. Even the BRSR, it talks about companies to lay down their risk and opportunities, how they see it, whether it's a risk or opportunity, what kind of impact they foresee out of it. Similarly, SASB, integrated reporting, CDP, all these assessments tends to start with the materiality assessment, and then out of the materiality assessment, the learnings that you have, that will help you in implementing all these frameworks over a period of time. I think process involved in materiality, Sukriti will now take you through with the process of materiality assessment, double materiality assessment, and also at the end we would be discussing some case studies, how global giants have been using materiality assessment to frame their own ESG roadmap or their own objectives. Over to you, Sukriti.
Thank you so much, sir.
So,
Am I
Sukriti,
audible?
when you discuss, you give some Indian prospects also.
Yes, sir, of course. I will do that. Thank you so much, Pawan sir and Ankit sir, for setting the stage. And I think Ankit sir has quite lucidly explained what materiality assessment is. It is basically trying to assess and introspect in its own unique ways. Every company has its own unique way of understanding what is important for them. So initially, when materiality assessment became a buzzword, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, people would think that it is related with materials, the materials that a company uses. And eventually, it came down to the broad understanding and the real understanding of materiality assessment as an act of introspection, wherein a company would go within itself, take 4 steps behind, and assess if whatever they've been doing, whatever they are doing today, are even the right steps, and if it is taking them in the right direction. So this is I think uh, quite an economic principle that in every 25 to 30 years, and I think I emphasize that in every talk that we have upon ESG, that every 25 to 30 years, there's always a tectonic shift in the way economy functions. And we are not living in that era anymore where there was a there is uh, quite abundant availability of the resources and the rampant usage can be done. We have started talking about regeneration and started understanding the importance that there needs to there's a need for slowing down in terms of our activities, so that we give nature and natural resources enough time for rejuvenation. And that's, I think, quite an important material aspect for all the companies to introspect on. While coming to the processes involved in materiality assessment, how the process it starts from a very broad aspect, from a bird eye view to the microscopic view. This is mainly the process that the consultants follow, uh, and that starts from defining scope and boundary, which is very important. See, when it comes to analyzing what is important for a company, it could be any remote possibility. I mean, I know, and I again emphasize on the butterfly effect, that something happening in some part of the world might have an impact on the other side. It could be geopolitical, it could be anything. Like we can see how what Russia and Ukraine war has done to the economy of the entire world. So nothing is we can say living in isolation. When there are no parts in the way nature functions. Therefore, but at the same time, in order to assess for a company, uh, we cannot we cannot have the universe on our plate to take care of. That's God's job. As consultants, I think it is important that we define that there is a particular boundary. For example, you identify that environmental resources are a crucial aspect for your company to function for your operations. So the boundary is defined only with respect to the environmental aspects, or it could be social aspects, or it could be governance aspects. If not an aspect, then it could be a geographical boundary. For example, you have 10 offices, but you want to do a materiality assessment for 5 warehouses. So defining a boundary is very important. That helps in you identifying, dividing it into proper steps as to what needs to plugged before anything else. Second would be develop a comprehensive list of material topics. Once you've defined a scope and a boundary, you come down to preparing a list of material topics. And those material topics are crucially identified in 3 formats. One is high risk, second is moderate risk, and third is least concern. That is how that is a very broad, that is a broad and a very logical way of working right in the current scenario, that you demarcate this list into these 3 categories. So higher risk needs to be plugged on an immediate and an important on an important aspect. Second, moderately can take some time, but it needs to be plugged. However, sometimes we do tend to identify that we believe as companies that, okay, this factor is not going to impact me as much. But as the time approaches, that factors ends up becoming a gigantic task that in the end we are not able to identify, and we are not able to identify the solutions for. So ignoring any of the risks is not something that you should do. However, prioritization is important. Then the third step would be demarcating the current activities and ESG factors. This is something I think I've covered in my last section, that you also can make demarcations as environmental, social, and governance. It can also be done on the basis of geography. It can also be done on the basis of aspects, or it can also be done on the basis of how your company functions. It completely depends on how your operations are. Identifying potential material issues in each factor. So once you have defined the boundary and once you have defined the material aspects, you have also defined the environmental, social, and governance aspects, high, moderate, and least risk concerns. Then within those, identifying which needs to be tackled with how much priority is also an important aspect. But this comes as a fourth step. Now, this is something, these 4-5 steps are within the company. Now let's come to the stakeholders. See, stakeholders, often we tend to feel, and we tend to take them for granted because we've been working with them for such a long time. We think that it's not important. But each and every aspect, each and every person, and each and every resource getting impacted by our operations is our stakeholder. We broadly identify them in the category of vendors, employees, customers, suppliers, government, community. But they can also extend to extended communities, primary, tertiary, secondary communities, the people in the least on the bottom line of our supply chain. So anybody or everybody who is even remotely impacted by our operations is our stakeholder. So having a stakeholder engagement program is also very important. That can be done through various activities such as feedback forms. You can completely deploy a separate department that is taking care of the stakeholder grievances, stakeholder feedback, stakeholder managing any kind of activities that are there with stakeholders, assessing their own ESG activities, assessing their ethical practices. So this is a very, very crucial aspect of materiality assessment. And also with the BRSR notification also from the perspective of BRSR also, the value chain is forming a very important part of any business and its operations. Coming down to the third last step would be seek inputs from the management. After doing all these activities, you take a report, you take a comprehensive report to the management. Now, what the management feels about all these activities is also of extreme importance because that forms the part of the governance. And when the management approves of, okay, these are the material aspects that we need to take care of, or probably sometimes what happens is you need not necessarily take feedback from the management. You have to give the feedback to the management because it's difficult for anybody sitting inside a boardroom to assess what is going on outside with the community that is out there. I'm just stating an example. So sometimes you need to come to the management and give them a feedback. So here, as Pawan sir has asked me to state um, an example from the Indian ethos, we all are aware that if in the ancient times, when the Rajas and the Maharajas would have their particular darbans who would move with the common crowd, dressed as common crowd, and then come back and give the natural feedback of the people about the governance that is going on in that particular area. So it is just something like that. You need not necessarily need to have any kind of undercover agents, but you can have a system and mechanism in place. So this is, I think, something that has existed in Indian ethos for a very long time. The kings and the people who've been in the power, who've had the reins of the society in their hands, have always had a mechanism in place to take feedback from the people from all stratas of the society. So as a company, as an entity that has an impact, that sells its services and products, as has an impact on people, you tend to have this responsibility of taking feedback from those stakeholders on either on your services or on your behavior, on your conduct, on the impact, whether it's related to health, whether it's related to social aspects, anything. And then comes the prioritizing those material aspects. I think prioritization is something that is taking place since step one. You're obviously prioritizing everything. And the last and the most important step is once your materiality report is created, it is crafted, you integrate each and every step into the strategy of your operations and your working system, even if it means to move the status quo, because that's the important rationale of ESG implementation frameworks all across the globe, that the status quo now needs to shift. And I've been emphasizing it, I'll emphasize again, that every 25 to 30 years, there's a tectonic shift that comes in either in any form or in every form. And this shift in today's economic practices has come through ESG implementation, ESG framework implementation programs. Next slide. Okay, I think I cannot emphasize enough on the importance of materiality assessment, because this is something that I personally in the ESG practice, I'm very fond of this practice. I believe deeply in this practice because it helps the entity introspect over its actions and impact. It is in its true and it's in spirit form. It's a spiritual practice for all the companies to go deep down into their activities and make the right shifts and introspect on their actions and their impact on this on environmental, social, and governance aspects in every form. How those forms are, it gives a bird eye view to all the necessary factors. So you are able to basically have a view from the top, that as a third party, you're able to view it as a third party, which is extremely difficult. Like if you come and go and tell the person that these are the certain things that you're doing wrong, that person might retaliate, because we all have a defense mechanism. And company, being a legal person, might do the same thing. But given uh, giving the wisdom to the company that these are certain things that are material to you and you need to do them, it will help them come have an out of body experience maybe, and understand that these are the things that, okay, uh, they now these things need to change. Now probably my activities need to change, and I will be giving those examples in the coming slides. The third importance is it gives a microscopic view to all the factors. Now that I've had a bird eye view, I've had a top, and I've had an out of body experience. I know what things are material. I know what things that I need to do in order to do the course correction for my company. Now I need to come back to myself and make those shifts in action. Now that I've had the wisdom, the third step is, now that I've had the wisdom, I need to come back in the real senses on my board chair and make those changes through the righteous actions. And now wisdom needs to come in action. So this is again a very important aspect of materiality assessment. And the fourth aspect is it helps in assessing ESG implementation framework and roadmaps. Now, enough of spirituality. Now let's come to the real aspect, the practical aspect. I've had the wisdom. I know what I need to do. Now it comes on paper and it comes in action. And those actions are determined through my policies, through the way I'm making the changes in the company, and through the way in which I've been advised to do things and I'm actually doing them. Next slide, please. So broadly in India, there are, I mean, across the world, there are two sectors that function. One is service sector and the manufacturing sector. We'll first discuss about what could be the broad aspects of the material elements of service sector, and then we'll come to the manufacturing sector. But these are not limited to these factors. See, this is something extremely unique and very beautiful about the entire ESG practice, that even if you can create a framework for one particular industry, every company will have a unique set of challenges, unique set of framework. No similar framework can work for another company. Even if they're competitors, they're coming from the same set of industries, there will always be something unique about the way they function and their materiality aspects. So material elements in the service sector concentrate on organizations mainly in scope 3 aspects. So I think in a lot of our talks, we have discussed about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. I will tell about scope 3 emissions here in the environment section. The service sector, most of the time we come across this challenge, believes that they don't have an environmental impact because they're not manufacturing. But let me tell you, social service sector has a latent impact and even a deeper impact, because that impact is scattered and it is not being able to get measured. It's very difficult to measure scope 3 emissions. And scope 3 emissions are highly indirect emissions. For example, if there are 100 employees in an organization and they're commuting with their cars or their scooties, or they're coming from Uber, Ola, Rapido, even BlueSmart, whatever mode you're choosing to travel, that is comprising of your scope 3 emissions. Not everybody is coming in the same car, everybody is coming in the same way. So every individual in the organization has a unique carbon footprint that needs to be measured, that has a very technical and has a very unique way of measuring the carbon footprint of each and every individual. There are some people who are working from home. So if they're working from home, obviously there are emissions because they're using the laptops, they're using the systems, and they're using the technology that is using certain softwares that are very highly, they run on a high energy voltage platforms. So calculating those emissions is quite a challenge. And let me tell you that they're high in number as assessed with the manufacturing setup, because in manufacturing setup, there is concentration. Here it is, we've seen that in the service sector, the dilution is there. So I would like to completely remove this cloud from all the service sector industry players, that if you think that you do not have an environmental footprint, then you're wrong. You do have an environmental footprint, and that needs to be assessed. And I'm telling you that you'll be surprised once you assess it. Energy consumption, waste management. Waste management, anybody uses any kind of waste management from the service sector, of course, it is seen in the form of electronic waste that is concentrated in number, but a lot of unsegregated waste like food waste, tissue papers, general papers, waste paper, waste stationery is also is also comprised in the waste management section. And unfortunately, most of the companies do not have a segregating mechanism. Travel and transport, as I have mentioned, green certification. A lot of companies now are going for green certification, but there are certain set of strict standards that you need to follow. For example, you need to have a carbon footprint assessor. You need to be energy efficient. You need to show that the kind of energy consumption that you're doing is highly energy efficient. And your travel and transport is tied up with companies that claim that they have lesser carbon footprint than the traditional means. Then the water usage, you recycle water, and at the same time you are using the kind of gadgets that you're using are also energy efficient. So if you have these kind of checklists in place, then you do get a green certification, which I of course tell everybody to go for. The challenges in the social factor are more in the service sector, because it's the service sector is people driven, equivalent to technology driven. But technology is also dependent on people. The people who are, I mean, we all say that technology, AI is booming, AI is doing this, AI is doing that. But ultimately, AI is always going to stay in the hands of human brain, because there is no power that can surpass the intelligence of human intelligence. So AI could make our work easy, but ultimately it is always going to be people who will be managing that artificial intelligence. It's artificial at the end of the day. It's the people who are real intelligent. So customer experience and satisfaction, very important. Employee well-being, welfare, and engagement. It's a very crucial aspect in service sector. In service sector, oftentimes it is seen that people, because sometimes it's a sitting job, they tend to become obese or have any kind of health issues that were not prevalent in the earlier times, because people would be on the move. So service sector needs to have certain mechanisms in place, need to have at least one mental health professional needs to be there, or a mechanism in place where people are having some kind of an activity that does not make their goal achievement a sedentary process. So this is also material aspect. If your people are healthy, your organization is going to be healthy. So taking care of your employees, their mental well-being, their physical well-being, is also one of the aspects, crucial aspects that is material to all the service sector players. Diversity and inclusion. With education, with people having more access to education from all sectors across various castes, class, and creed. And we must not forget that it's written in our Indian constitution that nobody can be denied an equal opportunity basis any of the factors. So I don't think this requires any kind of this comes with plain common sense that even if a person is coming from any kind of background, any kind of dialect, any kind of way of thinking, if that person has the merits, then under no circumstances that person should be denied any kind of an access to that opportunity. Human rights and statutory compliances like POSH and maternity benefits, again, a very important aspect. It's a statutory compliance that needs to be there in all the companies. Social impact assessment. In most of the NBFCs, MFIs, we see that companies have started going for social impact assessment of the money that they lend. I'm giving an example. I mean, it's applicable for every company, but I'm just giving an example that even MFIs and other companies are becoming so conscious of the fact that the money that they're lending to certain causes are getting utilized in the same manner, and that money is creating an impact into the lives of the people who've taken the loan, who've taken those kind of money, and it's having a positive impact and it's changing their lives for better. Let's come to the governance aspects. Board diversity. I think by company law has quite lucidly explained what the board diversity needs to look like. There has to be women representation in the board as well in order to increase the diversity. And see, the idea of having a woman on board is not just to give, it's not like a reservation. It's about not denying a woman her right to contribute to a company's growth just because she's a woman. If she's competent, then she must have a chance. It's all about competence. There's no point in leaving out any person behind just because of a particular factor. Just because a majority feels that this person does not look like me, emote like me. Whenever there is a woman on board, she brings a certain perspective. She brings a collaborative perspective. Competition is important, but today's time is all about collaboration. Today's time is about coming together for the higher good. That's why women representation is important in the board, because of the softer and the kinder perspectives that she brings on board. It's not because, oh, there's a reservation, because we come across things like that. So this is what my advice to everybody would be, that it's don't see her as don't see the gender, see the perspective. If the perspective is collaborative, if the perspective is kind, it's soft, it's bridging the gap, it's bringing things together, it's making things work, and it's breaking the status quo, then why not? So now let's come to another aspect, that is transparency and accountability. Again, we've seen a lot of matters in the past times where transparency and accountability have stayed hidden from the crowd, from the statutory bodies. And that has costed people a lot of hard work, money, and time, and emotions. See, when we invest something in a company, we don't just invest our money, we also invest our emotions into that company, because when we earn money and we invest it with the emotion that one day it will give me benefits, uh, either on a rainy day or in general for my future, for my children's future. So whenever that kind of a transparency or accountability is not maintained by companies, and we've seen companies where, like we've seen the Sahara scam, we've seen what how Nirav Modi behaved. It's all because of the lack of transparency and people meandering through the loopholes of the law. So transparency and accountability also increases once you do the materiality assessment. If you don't have anything to hide, then bring into the public forum, and that will only generate trust in people, and you will get more investments from the crowd. You will get more love from the crowd. Ethical business practices. Why Tatas are loved so much? It's because of the energy that that entire board brings on the stage every time you go and hear them. It's all about ethics, talking about ethics, having ethical practices, and having that kind of an aura about your own company and your own self, because you're able to maintain those ethical practices. It's important because ultimately your company will be run by the common crowd that you most of the time ignore. Executive compensation and incentives. So fair wages, fair pay. It's again a statutory compliance. Risk management. Risk management is, I think, all the companies make risk management policies, but they make it from a financial perspective. Now, from the ESG perspective, you also need to have risk management policies that are related to your own internal resilience measures that you've taken against climate change that is happening. You might say, I'm not contributing to climate change. But when the climate change will come in its full throttle, it will not spare people who say that they've not uh, contributed to the climate change. So what is your resilience plan? How are you going to mitigate any kind of risks that there are because of any of the biodiversity loss factors around your area, or any kind of price inflation that might take? So it's a very broad area. Once we assess all the risks that can impact your company's future, then only will you be able to assess that and you'll be surprised to see that, okay, these all areas can impact my entire existence of 40 years, 50 years, or even 100 years. Next slide, please. Now let's come to the material elements of the manufacturing setup. So manufacturing setup has slight amount of different challenges from the service sector. Manufacturing setup has majorly contributes to scope 1 emissions, and the environmental areas that there are that can lead to risks are natural biodiversity, direct and indirect community facing in the impact, and it is also there in various frameworks. Discharge quality and monitoring, air emissions, efficient technology, raw materials. I'll be explaining all these factors. Environmental compliances, process efficiency. So these are some of the key material elements which are very, these are a given that these are the material elements for you. After conducting a materiality assessment, we'll be able to figure out what all other 100 factors are there. These are 6, 7, natural by default material factors that are important for your company's functioning. So if you are a company, for example, I'll give you an instance here. If you're a company that is probably working in a remote area, in a secondary forest area of Jharsuguda, and out from 40 years, you are doing mining activities in that area, without giving time to the natural resources to rejuvenate, the mines have completely depleted, and your business can be impacted due to natural biodiversity loss. So if you do not give the time to the biodiversity that get diverted, if you take a forest clearance and you clear a 80 hectares of forest land for mining activity, you will be able to mine it for how many years? For 20 years, 30 years. But if you do not give the time for the biodiversity to rejuvenate as per the nature-based targets that there are, science-based targets, nature-based targets that there are, then you are bound to face the losses because the natural element of that particular biodiversity area is depleted. So this is a material factor for you. Direct and indirect community facing impact. Again, I'll give an instance of you are working in, say, outskirts of demarcated primary forest area, and you've been allotted 100 acres of area for mining, and within the 10 kilometers vicinity, there is a tribe that is living, has been residing in that area, and that is a protected tribe under the Forest Protection Act. Then how are you going to manage that particular tribe? They are also your stakeholders. That is why we have environmental impact assessment. And the third step in the entire environmental impact assessment is public hearing. And in that public hearing, you need to have the veto of the Gram Panchayat and all the communities that are getting impacted by your operations. And I am giving this example. These are extreme examples for the companies who are operating in these zones and who are operating in these kind of products. Now let's come to discharge quality and monitoring. Let's come to the lighter areas. Discharge quality and monitoring. Every factory does some kind of an effluent discharge. It is a given. It is not possible that you're a factory and you do not do discharges. If you do a discharge without monitoring its primary, secondary, and tertiary quality, then eventually it is going to create some kind of a poisonous environment within your factory area. And again, it is going to impact people living within the vicinity of your factory. And it will either fetch you bad reputation, it will fetch you bad PR, and it can fetch you a lot of penalties under the Environment Protection Act. Air emissions. Air emissions are completely controlled by the Air Act and the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. And according to the emissions that there are, if you do not do the monitoring of your emissions, and if these emissions are beyond a particular level, and you do not put the quality of the chimneys that are prescribed under the Schedule 1 of the Air Act, then again you are liable to pay hefty penalties to the state or the central government, depending upon the damage that you cause. And you can read the oleum gas case of 1991, in which the company had to face the penalties of more than 50 crores because of the bad air that they were discharging for years in the North Delhi area. Having efficient technology is the solution. Now we have good technologies in place that are able to monitor your discharges and air emissions. So having those efficient technologies in place is the solution. Raw material sourcing system that is related with your sustainable sourcing. How do you source your materials? You can have the world-class facility. You can have all your environmental clearances and practices, best practices in place. But your supply chain and the way you source your material is having no work ethics, are having no ESG compliances, and are doing rampant air and water pollution, then again you are coming back to square one. Because in today's time, not just yours, but entire supply chain's ESG performance is under the radar of your investors and even your and even the statutory bodies. Environmental compliances and relevant licenses. I always emphasize that we need to stay abreast with the latest judgments of NGT and Supreme Court on the environmental compliances and the relevant licenses there are. Plastic waste management rules is getting amended every particular year. EPR started with a voluntary activity, but now has become a compulsory activity for even the metal industry from 2026, according to 6 December notification. So environment and staying abreast with the environmental compliances and applying for relevant certifications is very important to showcase that you are an environmentally aware, conscious, and a smart company. Process efficiency. Process efficiency is a very important aspect. See, all these aspects are important at the end of the day. But process efficiency is one area that identifies if the process that you have inculcated in your company, which you think is efficient, is actually efficient from a third party view or not. So taking a third party view, take how the thermodynamics of that machine is working is very important, because fugitive emissions and leaks are those kind of emissions and discharges that you will not be able to figure out, but they happen. And they can be mapped only when there is a third party view, there is a third party assessment that happens within your factory premises, and they are able to get mapped and plugged according to the technology that your third party person suggests. So fugitive emissions and leaks are also very dangerous aspects that are, and they're quite notorious in nature. Like you will not know. They will just keep leaking like 1 ton of methane every day. You will not be able to measure that. But 1 ton of methane every day in a month will make 30 tons of methane every month. And that is quite a greenhouse gas. And you will not be able to notice. So process efficiency, having good technologies in place is very important for manufacturing setups. Social aspects, labor law compliance, implementation in letter and spirit. Labor law is getting codified and getting stricter with each passing day. We cannot treat the labor in the same manner as we have been treating them in past 30, we treated them 30 years or 50 years ago. There is a dignity and there is respect in which they have to be treated, and that has to be there in letter and in spirit. Their health and safety should be of primary concern to every factory owner. Community engagement in terms of feedback. Customer satisfaction, I think I've emphasized it. It's same for service and manufacturing setup. Diversity inclusion, traditional knowledge protection. Traditional knowledge is one area that is emphasized in BRSR notification also. When you come in direct contact with the communities, how you are able to preserve, protect the traditional knowledge that is there with the people living in those protected forest areas, and are able to use it for higher good, not steal it from them. Let it stay with them, and they are able to use it and harness it in the best possible way. I have an example in my mind. There is a wave of this particular hair oil called Adivasi hair oil on Instagram, and some CSR activities have taken place. It's a particular tribal community of Karnataka that has the solution of growing hair within 100 days, and those and a lot of people have this kind of feedback that it has actually worked. It's kind of a magic oil, And the CSR companies are not stealing their traditional knowledge from them. They're letting them keep it, but they're marketing their activities and they are helping those tribal areas survive and make money from their own traditional knowledge. So this is one example that just came to my mind and I thought I'll share it with all of you. Let's come to the governance aspect. Board diversity goes without saying. Decision making, strategic decision making, transparency and accountability again, ethical business conduct, compensation and incentives, risk management strategies, stakeholder engagement, value chain management and conduct. I think I've calculated and carried all these areas in my talk until now. The governance aspect remains the same for the service and the manufacturing setup. Next slide, please. Now let's come to double materiality. So there's a lot of confusion around materiality and double materiality. Materiality assessment would be to probably identify and assess how the company is working, what are the material factors for it, and what are the key areas that needs to be worked on. That would be the materiality assessment. We've covered all those areas. Ankit sir has covered it. I have covered it. Now the double materiality would be to assess only the financial implication of the materiality assessment. That's the only difference. How the factors, the material factors that I have calculated, that I have calibrated in the form of a report, are going to impact my finances. That is the only difference between materiality and double materiality assessment. So a double materiality assessment in the context of ESG refers to comprehensive evaluation that considers both internal financial impacts on the company, that is internal financial assessment, and external impacts on the stakeholders, broader environment, which is stakeholder materiality. Financial materiality refers to impact of ESG factors on the financial performance of a company. It focuses on how external factors like climate change, social issues, and governance practices can affect companies' bottom line, shareholder risks, and ESG profiles. If a company encounters legal risks or reputational damage due to inadequate environmental practices, this could negatively impact its financial performance, stock price, and investor confidence. We will be soon coming to the case studies, how this has impacted the company's performance. Next slide, please. Essential factors of double materiality. The essential factors of double materiality are dual perspective. It gives you a perspective as to how the money making activity of the company is impacting the environment and how the environment depletion or environmental factors are going to impact the company's bottom line, company's profitability. So you see, if we see how beautifully interconnected everything is, we all are interdependent on each other in some or the other form.
Kriti किसकी है?
Yes, sir.
Sukriti,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir. So there was just some minor technical issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Essential factors of double materiality, the dual perspective I've just explained. Comprehensive reporting. So in the integrated reporting would have a lot of facets where you would be required to report on the materiality aspects and the materiality aspects impacting the finances. Risks and opportunity factors, again, you will be able to immediately identify the moment you conduct a dual materiality that how your company's risks and opportunity are going to get impacted. You figured out your risks and opportunity, but how financially they're going to get impacted, That comes out after double materiality assessment. Stakeholder inclusion gets even intense here. In the materiality assessment, you were including the stakeholders to understand the importance of some of the stakeholders. As I said right in the beginning, that you have to map them according to their priority basis. But here the stakeholder inclusion would get a little intense to understand again whether their impact is going to impact in whatever way is going to impact their finance and their profitability. Long-term value and sustainability. Sustainability and long-term value, this is a broad area. Sustainability in its cognitive and its real sense is any commonsensical activity that helps you sustain no matter what. I think we have discussed it so many times, and I discuss it every time. The moment the buzzword sustainability comes, using the resources and keeping them utilized for the future purposes and all those things, those are just mere definitions. But the real and in spirit definition of sustainability is applying common sense in order to sustain, no matter what, no matter how hard the time gets, no matter how easier the times are. If you are able to sustain yourself, you are able to apply common sense, you are able to stay grounded, you are sustainable. Please, next slide. Significance of materiality assessment. Not everybody goes for materiality assessment, double materiality assessment. People usually identify their risks and opportunity, and this is something that we do day in and day out in identifying the hidden aspects, hidden risks and opportunities, as Sir has explained. But what double materiality assessment does is it helps you make change some of your strategic decisions. You must have had a strategic decision. You must have had a board meeting and decided on, okay, on this strategy, I'm going to work like this, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. And suddenly an ESG double materiality assessor comes on and breaks everything. Because that assessor is able to see that within 5 years, this material change is going to happen in the market, which you are not able to probably foresee, or probably in the natural resources that you are not able to foresee, but you'll have to change your strategy accordingly. So probably you need to, rather than having a 5-year plan, have a 1-year plan, have a 1.5-year plan, and see how the wave goes. Then make a 5-year plan. So seeing how the dynamics are changing with respect to how your finances will get impacted, this study can only be conducted through double materiality assessment, and only a double materiality report will be able to give you this kind of vision as to if you need to have a long-term plan for this particular thing, or you need to have you need to test your waters first. Investor confidence and ESG integration. The moment you're able to show a double materiality report to your investors, they are able to they immediately generate confidence, even if the numbers won't be looking good. But as an investor who's also aware of how the dynamics are right now, will be able to generate some trust in you, because they are seeing that if you are so cautious that you are going to the extent of conducting a double materiality assessment, that means you will protect my right also if there is a rainy day. So you see how you will be able to play with the psychology with everybody. And it is not just a strategy. It is something that you're doing in spirit, because you're genuinely concerned about the sustainability of your company. Now let's come to the third area, stakeholder trust. This is quite integrated within investor confidence. Long-term value creation, strategic decision making, investor confidence, people are standing with you, sustainable aspects are there in your favor, you're able to see how the future is going to be, you are going to sustain no matter what because you are applying common sense. Next slide, please. So, why I did not talk about challenges in the materiality assessment, but I'm going to be talking about the challenges while conducting double materiality assessment. Because materiality assessment is the first step. That will give you risks and opportunity that is slightly easier to conduct. Challenges that I face while conducting a double materiality are related with data collection and analysis. Gathering data for both financial and impact materiality can be complex, especially for companies with global supply chains. There is no particular aspect, there is no particular framework, there is no particular internal mechanism that how my operation sitting in India while my procurement is coming from Africa, how will I assess till the time that the procurement is coming, my business is running, I am a billionaire. But the moment the procurement stops coming, how will I stay a billionaire? And the procurement is dependent upon the natural resources that are there in South Africa. And there is no mechanism that I have in order to assess till how much time will I be able to enjoy the profits that I'm making from that particular procurement because I have not done any materialities, because I have not done any double materiality assessment so far. I'm living in the moment. So gathering data from, and especially for the global supply chain, with people who are importing, exporting, raw material coming from China, raw material coming from Taiwan, the data management and analysis gets quite tricky. But being ESG professionals, we've been able to figure out a way. It requires detailed tracking of environmental and social outcomes, which can be quite resource intensive. So if the resources are intensive and the resources are scarce in nature, then only it starts ringing the bells of the final product seller that, okay, this needs to be done now. As sustainability is being talked about, and as sustainability professionals, this is not something advisable. We must have a data collection and analysis in place. We must have an internal framework in place, and we must have some kind of a department that is completely overlooking the natural resource management of the resources that are getting procured. The second aspect is lack of standardization. Since there is no global set standard that gives us a clear picture of how double materiality assessment needs to be conducted, this is getting conducted as per the whims and fancies of the consultants or the companies themselves, because there is absolutely no compulsion. So there needs to be a proper standard, there needs to be a proper mechanism. And in the absence of that mechanism, we need to rely on, again, the commonsensical principles of sustainability and materiality assessment that I've explained in my previous slides. Balancing short-term versus long-term priorities. This is something that I always emphasize on. And this is also commonsensical in nature. Right now, I can see the diamond. I can wear the diamond. I can enjoy the diamond for some time. But the moment diamond finishes, diamond is not there anymore. It's going to create a chaos. So we need to have a balance. We cannot think in terms of just today. We cannot, and just today, I do not just mean that we are only thinking in terms of the resources. We also need to have strategies in place, short or long, that are helpful for us to sustain. Companies often struggle to reconcile the short-term financial pressures of their investors. with the long-term goals related to sustainability. This is one problem. Therefore, there needs to be quite a deep consonance between the investors and the companies. And therefore, these kind of disclosures, these kind of confidence-giving activities are important, so that your investor does not pressurize you, rather trusts you that you can and you will be able to pull yourself out if there is a rainy day. As more investors prioritize ESG factors, the importance of balancing both the aspects are going to grow in the future. So have a bird eye view, but at the same time, keep it with a microscopic lens. Next slide, please. Okay, now we come to the case studies. So Unilever's double materiality approach. Unilever is one of the companies that conducted a double materiality assessment, and the aspects on which it did its double materiality, it wanted to become more climate change resilience. So it changed certain of its strategies. As a major food and beverage company, climate change poses risks in the form of rising commodity prices, resource scarcity. Like this is something that came out in their materiality and their double materiality approach once it was conducted, and increased operational costs due to extreme weather events. See, we are seeing that agricultural land is declining because people are selling off their lands, because of which the food prices is getting increased. If the food price, the raw material food price gets increased, of course, the processed food price is going to get increased. It's going to create resource scarcity. So the company needs to stay resilient in those times, and therefore it conducted a double materiality assessment. Supply chain disruptions. Unilever's supply chain is heavily dependent on raw materials like palm oil, tea, and soy. Let me tell you, palm oil, tea, soy, and any other crop that is grown on monocropping basis is going to deplete the soil's quality over a period of time. So we are all by default dependent on the quality of the soil that is growing the food for us. Tea, there is a recent report in Rangamati tea estates, the 4 tea estates with 45 hectares of lands has completely gone barren on the Indo-Bhutan border because of continuous cultivation of the same crop. So again, I'll come back to the Indian ethos. Our ancestors never did monocropping. They always focused on multi-cropping. Not even, there would be 5 types of or 6 types of crops that would be grown on 1 acre of land, because every crop would have a different kind of nutrition, and through the mycelium of the roots and the shoots of different kind of crops, they would exchange minerals within the soil. Since we are not able to see those activities with our eyes, we think that they don't exist. But monocropping is the most unhealthy way of cropping and agricultural system that has depleted most of the Punjab lands and Haryana lands, and it has now come down to UP as well. So our ancestors knew what monocropping is, how soil functions. It stayed irrigated for longer period of times, and that system is the only and the most sustainable way of agricultural practices that would have stabilized the prices of the commodities in today's time. Also, had we practiced those kind of traditional practices. Regulatory changes and environmental risks related to deforestation and biodiversity loss could affect the availability and cost of these materials, impacting financial performance. So the deforestation activities have again, they have always stayed under the radar of the Ministry of Environmental and Forest and Climate Change. Obtaining an environmental clearance is one of the toughest tasks. You have to prove your metal, you have to prove that you are not going to be biodegrading. Compulsory afforestation fund sits right under the nose of the Supreme Court, and therefore rampant deforestation cannot be just done for these kind of activities, for even agricultural activities. And therefore, these kind of pulls and pressures from all across the sectors it has been identified as one of the challenges for the operations of Unilever. Therefore, therefore this case study. Please, next slide. So there are two kinds of materiality, as I said. One is financial materiality, one is impact materiality. Financial materiality is the impact that I will have on my finances because of the external factors. And impact materiality means the impact on me, the impact that I will have on the external factors because of my operations. So it goes hand in hand. It's like they're shaking hands with each other. Unilever also focuses on how its operations impact society and environment. So key areas would include environmental degradation, health and well-being. Supply chain, particularly palm oil sector, has faced scrutiny for its role in deforestation. So India has come up with a new palm oil policy. We have completely stopped the import of palm oil from 2026. This is the plan, and we in the northeastern region is getting ready for palm oil growing for the growth of palm oil in secondary forests. So according to the policy, the primary forests are completely debarred. Like you just cannot enter those forests, the demarcated forests, and the national parks, and the protected areas under the Wildlife Protection Act. Inside those areas, you can only do palm oil deforestation. You can only do palm oil growing activities in the government allocated forest areas where there is least chance of man and wildlife conflict. So this is one of the important key steps that India has taken. No palm oil importation. We will go grow our own palm oil, and eventually there is a plan to completely eradicate palm oil and come on its alternate products. Health and well-being. Unilever's products, especially food and personal care items, can have an impact on consumer health. The company has committed to improving the nutritional profile of its products and promoting healthier lifestyles. If you see principle 2 of the BRSR report, it talks about the safety of the product that goes out in the market. Therefore, life cycle analysis of that product is very important. And Unilever has taken quite a cognizance of that. And not just human health, but also at the end of the life cycle, how that product and its entire packaging is going to behave with the environment and in how much time it is going to biodegrade is also taken care of. But all these things came out once they conducted a double materiality assessment. Okay, next slide, please. Let's do the final case study of this whole entire presentation, and that is Apple's double materiality strategy. Apple operates in a highly competitive tech industry, which has significant environmental and social implications. It conducted a financial materiality assessment. It recognized the potential financial risks associated with climate change, consumer attitude, and made certain declarations in their product environment report dated September 9th, 2024, considering climate change regulations and supply chain risks. Increasing regulations and carbon emissions could impose costs on Apple if it does not transition to renewable energy. Therefore, it is making a lot of changes according to this report into their office premises. They are shifting to completely renewable energy, and they've made certain declarations about going net zero by 2030, and failure to comply with these environmental standards could also lead to fines and penalties, because once you make self-declarations, then you yourself are binding yourself with your own word, and word is law. Supply chain risk. Apple's supply chain depends on raw materials like rare earth metals and minerals, many of which are sourced from conflict zones or regions with poor labor conditions. regulatory changes or reputational damage related to labor rights could negatively impact Apple's effects, brand value, and profitability. So there is a latest news that came up with which is quite surprising, that the Gen Zs and Gen Alpha would probably not be interested in having the Apple hoopla inside their home appliances, and they're shifting to more sustainable options. And this change, this wave has come through the millennials. That we would like to see how the product is sourced, how the product is made, if it is ethically sourced. And I've also been talking about how the fur industry has completely declined. Paris has closed down its fur farms. Sweden is closing down its fur farms. The same industry that boomed in the 90s is about to completely eradicate from the global market in another 2-3 years time, because of its because of the investigations by certain NGOs. And when people saw how these things are getting sourced, and they do not want to get associated with such brands anymore. Next slide, please. Yes, so Apple has also made a declaration that it is going to make use of uh, make use of recycled products in its into its products. It is going to enhance its labor practices. After conducting a double materiality assessment, it has, as I said, it has made a declaration of going carbon neutral by 2030. And Apple's recycling program and use of recycled aluminium in products further demonstrate its commitment to reducing the environmental impact of its product. But how did Apple come to know that all these things are required? It's only because it went out of its way to conduct a materiality and a double materiality assessment. And had they not done it, they would have not known that this is the impact that they're probably bringing out in the society. And what is going around is going to probably come around to them only by declining their own operations, declining their own sales, because people are realizing the importance of sustainability. Next slide, please. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I would like anyone, if they have any questions, I would like to answer. Sir would also like to
Thank you.
take the panel up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Giving a detailed presentation and detailed case study also. Now it's the time for question answer. I have few questions received with me. Does social media come under stakeholders engagement?
Nope.
Hmm?
Nope. But how you are marketing your things or putting the communication, that will have a context. But anybody who use your social media would not definitely be not a stakeholder.
Okay. How does double materiality enhance ESG reporting and decision making? Sukriti.
So the entire presentation was about that, how it is going to enhance. Double materiality is going to give you two insights. The insight number one, how your conduct and how your behavior is impacting the society.
Okay.
And by society, I mean everybody, every stakeholder, even the environment. And in return, how the external factors like climate change are impacting your operations and your existence in the market. So once you conduct that study, like what Apple did, what Unilever did, they were able to identify that these are the possible risks, and there are certain steps that need to take if they want to stay abreast in the market.
Ankit, there is one very important issue. How the people will understand that this ESG or this materiality will help them grow business, differentiate with the competitor. When the people will realize this, because governance, they have realized if you are a good governed company, your valuation will be higher. But when you think this situation will come?
I think, sir, the ecosystem itself is developing in such a manner that because of various interventions, one would be intervention from the government side in terms of regulatory enforcement. Other intervention will be in terms of from the investor side, and then interventions from the stakeholders. all these interventions will lead to companies realizing the fact that why they need to be more sustainable in terms of their operations and why ESG plays an important role. And it's also it is, I think, also something which should come, as I mentioned, from the top management itself. Just these interventions will not help unless and until your management is clear that you bound to achieve something which would add to sustainability, considering climate change, a lot of issues. And only then you will be able to actually achieve what you intend to do by way of
Ankit, the
ESG.
95% business thinks that what is monetary benefit they are getting.
Hmm.
Anything which is not monetary, people they want to follow, but always they do the latter part, not the spread part. So, how to convert this particular concept so people should realize that this is not only helping creating the compliance, but also creating the bottom line of the company's performance.
But I think sustainability will also have a lot of direct monetary benefits in terms of, for example, if you see people, even consumers, are trying to even buy products these days which are more environment friendly, which it doesn't lead to a lot of wastage of resources. They tend to look at all these things as part of the label disclosures on a product. So it's not only the intangible benefits you tend to gain a lot of tangible benefits in terms of, for example, your employee attrition might go down. Society will accept your brand vis-a-vis in a competition to another brand which have more environment friendly related disclosures, environmental sustainability, adaptive practices during the course of the production. So there would be a lot of monetary benefits also that one can see. And sir, it's not always about the benefits, considering how the climate is changing. If you don't adapt yourself to those climate changes, risk, whether physical or transient, then it would be also very difficult for you to survive in a long period of time.
Okay, okay, okay. Could you share uh, any example where, like Sukriti has given example of Apple,
Hmm.
but any example which has changed the transformed the company's ESG strategy? Materiality,
Any,
materiality assessment has changed the strategy of the company.
sir, if you see, I think I'm not able to recall any example. Sukriti will be in a better position to do see. But sir, the way, for example, big companies like Vedanta, Airtel, the way they are coming up with their sustainability report. Like I was reading to Vedanta's TCFD report where they are doing a lot of disclosures of climate related impact. Why these people are all doing these things? I don't think it's just because investors want so. It's also because they also tend to realize the importance of these factors, and therefore they are doing their bit and disclosing those as part of their reports.
Okay.
Sukriti, if you have any specific
No, okay,
example which you can quote.
Ankit,
Yeah.
you give answer because Sukriti has spoken so many
Okay.
things, but I want to take a new perspective.
Hmm.
Sukriti is giving, but your perspective I want. Do you think materiality assessment should be mandatory for ESG compliance?
Sir, it's not about mandatory. I think it's part of the process because as of now, as I mentioned initially, there is no written code, so there is nothing mandatory as such ESG. You are also only required to report, which is also a listed entities.
And
But in order to achieve sustainability in your operations, in your achieving, if you are trying to achieve good results in all E, S, and G factors, then you have to undertake this study to understand the importance of all these factors, important items falling under these factors, and then create your roadmap on alongside on that. The day ESG is codified and it is mandated for companies to adopt such a code, then one as a part of that code, it can be written that the process will involve conducting a materiality assessment.
okay, what challenges companies are facing to do this materiality assessment?
I think, sir, challenges itself first of all the acceptance of the fact that they have to implement or do something in ESG. That is a biggest realization that companies need to have. Then understanding what needs to be done, because as I said, there are a lot of factors. Which factors need to be looked into primarily? Whether they should looked into more in terms of profitability from the operations, or then the intangible benefits in terms of what they can get out of their human resource or social and other stakeholders. So there are various challenges which are associated with this assessment.
Okay, in your opinion, which sector is facing more challenge at determining materiality, service or manufacturing?
I think we discussed both the sectors. It would be
But which is
unless and
more?
until, sir, as I mentioned, it's very industry specific. Even services, there are a lot of industries within service. Even in manufacturing, there are lots of within manufacturing. So it would be very difficult to say which would face much of a different difficulties in undertaking the assessment.
Sukriti, you have any view on this?
So, with respect to conducting a materiality assessment, we face a lot of challenge, surprisingly, with the service sector. Because service sector, oftentimes, in the manufacturing setup, the companies are themselves able to realize, because they're able to perceive the emissions, they're able to perceive the impact. The service sector believes that we are not creating any pollution. So we have to go on step 0 of making them realize that you have an impact from the environmental perspective. On the social and on the governance aspect, I think that's not much of a challenge. But in the environmental aspect, they do have an impact, and in some cases they have a more impact than the manufacturing setup. But due to a gap in the understanding, we have that bridging takes a lot of time and energy.
Okay, okay. How does stakeholder engage influence materiality assessment?
Stakeholder engagements are okay. So stakeholders oftentimes right now, after the ESG framework that has been talked about in past 4 or 5 years, the companies have started realizing that they have to move beyond the perspective of shareholder engagement, shareholder interest. They've started coming to stakeholders. And stakeholders include shareholders, but also include customers, vendors, supply chain, managers, employees, communities, extended communities, government. So this is coming as a very overwhelming factor for companies that, oh, I need to take care of them also. But there is a very easy framework for all these things which can be devised. There is a way in which all these things can be managed, and their views and their engagement is important from the perspective of managing the company's reputation and company's operations, because ultimately the company is running for the people, by the people.
Okay. What is how much technology is used in this materiality assessment, and how the technology can play a strong role in this?
So there are softwares, I believe, available which helps you in designing the questionnaire on which you will obtain the responses from various respondents during the course of the assessment. Because it's more of a question answer driven assessment, talking to the concerned stakeholders, interviewing them. So there are platforms available which helps you in designing the questionnaire and getting responses on them.
Okay, but do you think that without technology you can't do the perfect structure?
Not necessary.
Okay, okay. Oh, there's so many other questions now. How is Indian industry accept this materiality in a holistic way rather than the only statutory requirement?
Sir, because statutorily, as I said, ESG in very few things are statutorily bound. For example, HR, in HR compliances, you are required to attain certain things. In environmental things, you are required to attain certain
Could you just
things.
close your.
So, lot of the things, if you are doing a materiality assessment, you are definitely doing something beyond statutory compliances.
Okay,
So the fact that you are undertaking a materiality assessment is the fact that you are intending to implement a framework which is much beyond what is statutorily required.
Okay. Any example of Indian MSME try to implement ESG with materiality?
Not as such.
Okay. How frequently to do materiality assessment?
How many?
How frequently to do materiality assessment?
Sir, generally, I believe it's done at the start of the process.
Okay.
And then I think over a period of time, once you've implemented, you can do again to readjust your strategy or your roadmap.
Okay. Considering that a large chunk of industry operates in an unorganized segment, are such measures going to be really impactful in long run?
So considering organized sector at some point of time will have to do these things. For example, if I am a supply chain partner of a global vendor and I am supplying a lot of things, they check my ESG related preparations, to what extent I'm complying with those compliances or whatever things are required to be done. I So long as it is only compliance, I will say this is what it's done, which is not done. But when it moves beyond compliance, then I cannot do things in the same manner unless and until I do and create a framework and implement it. And to create a framework, it's better to do a materiality assessment. But otherwise, also, if you see, for example, these are 100 factors that you believe are related in ESG, and you want to create something out of framework out of that also. So you can also do that. It's not that without materiality assessment, you cannot implement a framework. You can, but there are chances that you might stress on some things more, some things less, or you might also tend to miss out certain things.
Okay. Okay. Stakeholders, shareholders more or less interested in dividend, whereas stakeholders more interested in conservation of nature, how company can manage it through materiality concept. Is this concept is correct?
I think that shareholders, there are multiple kind of shareholders. Small retail shareholders generally are more concerned in dividends, but institutional shareholders are also more concerned in value creation, because they invest in companies to hold their shares for over a period of time. So value creation is also something which they look into. But other stakeholders like society, like employees, all have very different expectations from the company.
Okay. So now this time to close this session. So I will request Sukriti, just give your viewpoint uh,
Yes, sir.
this concept.
Yes, sir.
So
So,
one minute. For a monitoring environmental equality, various technology has to be used across the sector, and this technology itself has a question for the standardization, how it has to impact on the materiality. Yeah, that is right, because till the time the standardization process, which I have told in the beginning, on the international level will not take shape. The things software will also do the same thing, a different work with different style. You are absolutely right, Mr. Satish. Thank you very much. So, Sukriti, your point of view.
so double materiality is the second step, of course. Materiality is the first step. And materiality assessment, I think it's jargonized, and it through media, through a lot of content on the internet, it is coming across as something very confusing. However, it is nothing but a very simple activity of introspection. It does not require high-end technologies. It does not require high-tech analysis or things like that. It simply requires a consultant to ask you basic things, conduct interviews there, and understand, take a feel of how the culture is, go and understand how your processes are, how your systems are, and figure out what are the risks and what are the opportunities. Risks and opportunities, not just from the financial aspect, they will be covered with the double materiality of the impact that is getting created from the outside. But overall risk, not always your company suddenly start making losses, and you have to shut down your company. Sometimes your company faces a very bad reputational risk. Your company ends up doing something that has completely hurt the sentiments of the people, and therefore you have to completely shut it down because you do not have the interest of stakeholders anymore. But financially you could be doing well. So we don't have to have a very streamlined view. Having a peripheral view is very important, and that's what materiality and double materiality assessment gives. It's a simple process. It's nothing high tech. It's nothing rocket science. It requires plain common sense, and that's
Okay.
what ESG is.
Okay. Okay. Ankit, your view.
Nothing to add much. I think what is important that we also can take small steps instead of getting confused that ESG involves a lot of things. We can choose any of these factors, E, S, and G. Try to create something around that. Let's begin with, for example, S. Try to identify our stakeholders, internal, externals. Try to create something around that. That this is the manner how we are in what interest of stakeholders I will keep in mind, how I will interact, communicate with them. What are the things that I need to do internally? What are things that I need to do externally? And then we can take step one by one. It's not necessary that we should always create a wholesome plan to do all the things in one go. As there was a question on organized sector also. Even if we start on one thing, introduce good governance practices within the organization, that will itself help in adding a lot of values.
Okay. So I think the concept of ESG will be the future. After governance, we have to understand if you want to run business, whether you are MSME, whether you are a big company or listed company, you have to follow some principle. And today, those who will follow these principles, you will get discount in funding, you will get more equity funding, more people are looking for this. The valuation and branding of your company will enhance, whether you are a small business. Suppose you have a very small restaurant in a very, say, in Rajouri Garden, Punjabi Bagh, or any part of any country, and you are following certain principle, which is connected to environment, connected to your labor welfare. I think people will definitely follow. And Ankit, when somebody was asking MSME, in my opinion, MSME governance is not important for them. The important is E and S. Okay, because they are more governed by these things. Core governance will come when they will have a structure and all these things, disclosure, another thing which is not required. So I hope I think every business should follow E and S, and when they convert into corporate, then G also a part of this. No doubt, some portion of governance like small business partnership, proprietorship, they have to disclose properly, they have to file the return, pay the tax and other thing. So this is the future which will take place. I think, thank you very much, all my participants, those who have come. It's a very technical, specific subject. We don't hesitate to organize technical subject despite the limited interest. But I know when interest is less, tomorrow the same thing will take the big, it's a starting point, but tomorrow it will become the big tree of under which every corporate, every business has to work. With this, thank you participants, thank you Ankit, and thank you Sukriti for giving nice presentation, and thanks all. Friends, I just want to announce again our next 200 webinar. This is a milestone thing for corporate professional that we are completing this. Catalyst for corporate growth, unveiling the next wave of regulatory reforms. This is our topic and this is the program, and I hope that you please join in big number. We are calling best of the best people in the country. Till then, thank you very much.